Hello there, and welcome back to another video of the Twilight Imperium 4 browser app series. Today we're going to be going over the recent implementation of the 8th faction in the app, the Universities of Jol-Nar. So they have their faction sheet here, and we'll be going over a little outline of their abilities as well as their flagship, and then we're going to hop into a pre-made game to take a look at their technologies, and then we'll be showcasing off all these unique features of the faction. So starting off here at their faction abilities, we start with Fragile, which is in contrast to the Sardic Nar's Unrelenting ability. So Fragile, passive ability, which is going to apply -1 to the rolls of each of your unit's combat rolls during any combat. Then we have Brilliant, and this is where the faction really shines in terms of what it's good at. So Brilliant says that when we spend a command token to resolve the secondary ability of the technology strategy card, we may resolve the primary ability instead. So what that means is we're essentially doing the primary ability in all its steps if we choose to, and the only addition is we have to play that strategy token, right? So that means that, well, we'll see this once we get into the game, but that means that all we have to do, instead of spending 4 resources and a strategy token to research one technology, we can just spend the 1 strategy token, right? Because the primary ability, the first one is researched for free. Then if we want to do the second one, we can pay 6 resources in any way we see fit. And then the final technology ability, the final faction ability, which is a technology type ability, is in direct unison here to Brilliant. It's analytical. And analytical reads that when we research a technology that is not a unit upgrade, we may ignore 1 prerequisite. And so that's nice because it applies to both researches of the technology primary if we wanted. Now, we don't have any unit text here. We have the 4 commodities. But what we do have, like every other faction, is the flagship, the JNS Hylarim. So it reads that when we make a combat roll for this ship, if we roll a 9 or a 10 before applying any modifiers, that is, then we're actually going to be able to produce 2 additional hits, right? So what this means is that we regularly hit on a 6, right? Of course, there's the -1 modifier, so we actually have to roll a 5 to hit with this, right? But what this means is if we roll the dice and it's a raw 9 or a 10, then we're going to be producing 2 hits. Now, before applying modifiers, so if we roll an 8 and then we get the -1 from Fragile and go down to 9, we actually don't get the hit, these 2 additional hits, because it has to be before modifiers, right? And that includes things like any other abilities that would reduce our hit count. And going over the lore sheet, you can see that our starting technologies are pretty potent here. You start with 1 technology from each of the 4 different types, the basic ones, so that's really strong. And then our starting units here, 1 Dreadnought, 2 Carriers, 1 Fighter, 2 Infantry, 1 Space Dock, and the hefty 2 PDSs. So let's go ahead and jump into the game here. You can see we have a game set up, and we got the new looking icon there for the university. So if we go ahead and click play, we'll hop into the game. All right, so let's take a look here at what we're going to do. So the first thing before we do anything is let's take a look at those specific faction texts. And we can either view them here in the player info tab down here, along with the rest of the faction abilities, or we can go and find them in the technology decks. So the first one is E08 siphons. And E08 siphons is a passive ability, and it reads that after one player activates a system that contains one or more of our ships, we're going to gain a passive for trade goods. So it's pretty straightforward. And our other one in the propulsion deck, the 2-tier, spatial conduit cylinder. And it reads, you may exhaust this card after you activate a system that contains one or more of your units. That system is adjacent to all other systems that contain one or more of your units during this activation. So essentially it creates like a same type wormhole for you in the system you activated with your ships and every other system you have that has ships in it. Also units, doesn't have to be ships, can have just like a solo infantry on a planet and it'll apply. So let's see, let's showcase these faction abilities technologies now. So we're in the resolve the secondary ability of technology, and currently we just have the 4 starting text that I showed you. So here we're going to be able to see in full display our 2 faction abilities, brilliant and analytical. Okay, so other factions right now would only be able to research one technology, and they'd have to also spend 4 resources to do it. Now for us, we're actually going to be able to resolve the primary. And let's remind ourselves what the primary says. Primary allows us to research one technology and then spend 6 resources to research another technology if we want. So normally, we'd be restricted here to researching technologies that meet the prerequisites of the cards that we already have. So at most we could research, if we say we only wanted to research one technology, we could only research a prerequisite that is 1 biotic or a prerequisite with 1 propulsion, etc. But you'll see here, say I just want to research spatial conduit cylinder, if I double click it, and it tells me the first technology is researched, right? So now if I go to resolve strategy, and it reads technology secondary, and it recognizes that we're actually the Universities of Jol-Nar player. As the Universities of Jol-Nar, you can perform technology secondary as if you were resolving the primary. Right? And that tells us exactly what we would have to do there. But now say we only wanted to research E08 siphons, and we click check mark, we'll actually be able to do it. And that's because of the analytical ability. Right? We actually get to skip one of these blue prerequisites because of that. Now, let's go ahead and reset this. Let's see we try to do the same thing for a unit upgrade, right? So say we wanted to research Space Dock 2 because we think our analytical ability will help us do that, right? We have Sarween tools plus analytical should cover the prerequisites for Space Dock 2. So if we double click Space Dock 2 and now we try to research it, we'll actually be told that the prerequisites are not met. And that's because, if you recall, analytic only applies to technologies that are not unit upgrades. Right? And that's in the flavor of the universities being not a combat-oriented faction, at least in the early game. But okay. So let's go ahead and reset our choices here. And let's research our 2 faction technologies, which we should be able to do because if we look at E08 siphons, we have Sarween tools plus analytical to cover these prerequisites. So we'll double click E08 siphons. And now because we can resolve the primary during the secondary, we can also research spatial conduit cylinder, which is met by anti-mass deflectors plus analytical. So we got our two technologies. Now, if we just try to research, we are doing the primary, so we need to spend 6 resources. So let's do that. We'll exhaust 4 resources from planets and 2 trade goods. And let's go ahead and confirm our choices. Researching technologies, E08 siphons, spatial conduit cylinder. And we'll confirm. And yeah, we'll check our technology deck. There's E08 siphons. Going to the second part of the deck, there's spatial conduit cylinder. And the game log, we can actually see here that the game log reads that Alice resolved the primary ability of technology. And so this is technically correct because we're not resolving the secondary, even though that's what we were prompted to do. All right. So that's brilliant and analytical there. All right, so we'll get Bob to pass his turn, and it'll be our turn to perform an action. So let's see how these technologies work now. Well, only one of our technologies is not passive. So let's go ahead and see how spatial conduit cylinder works. So this is going to come after we activate a system that contains one or more of our units. And then we'll be able to move units from other parts of the galaxy into that system where they normally wouldn't be able to make it. So we're here as Alice, the Universities of Jol-Nar, and we're the red player. So if we look up here, in this system we have our flagship, 3 fighters. And suppose we want to get this carrier with these 4 fighters and this dreadnought to this system. So what we can do is activate the system with the flagship by double-clicking it. Now, the game is prompting us to resolve an ability while the system is activated. And if you're not sure what to do here, you can click the help button. And we'll be prompted here that we're going to be asked to play any game component that can be resolved after a system is activated. And indeed, if you read spatial conduit cylinder, it reads that you can exhaust the card after you activate a system, so system activated. So let's play this card, which is an exhaustible technology. So if you've already used it once during the round, you can't use it again. So double click it, and we'll be asked to confirm that we want to play this card, and we'll click yes. And so spatial conduit cylinder was played by us. And we can see that here in the game log as well. So the other players now get a chance to play abilities in response, but they're going to go ahead and pass. We'll come back to us, and now we'll be able to move ships. So let's go ahead and do that here. Let's get this dreadnought from our home system, and let's get this carrier and these 4 fighters. And now let's confirm our movement into the active system up here. So we'll be asked to confirm the 4 fighters in the carrier and the dreadnought. And there we go. Spatial conduit cylinder ensures that those units actually can make it into the system. So now we have the 3 fighters we originally had in the system, plus the 4 we moved from the VEFIT 2 system for 7 here. The dreadnought from our home system, and the carrier from the VEFIT 2 system as well. The flagship was already there to begin with. So that is spatial conduit cylinder working as intended. Alright, so let's end our turn here. Now, our second faction technology, which is E08 siphons, is activated after another player activates a system that contains one or more of our ships. So currently it's Bob's turn, and hovering over this system we can see Bob is the Sarl tribes. And so let's see how many trade goods we have. So we have 3. So theoretically, what should happen here is when Bob activates our system, we should get those 4 trade goods and be bumped up to 7. So Bob's going to go ahead in another tab here and activate our system. So he has activated our system. And now you can see in the game log that Alice automatically plays the passive E-res siphons. Right, and this is really the prime example of why automation is so good in the app. If you have a real life game going on, and there's so much going on, you have like 10 technologies, you're looking through your action cards, you're thinking about what to trade with someone, and you forget that you have E-res siphons. Well, the app automatically plays that for you, right? You don't have to worry about that. And you can see now we've gone up from 3 trade goods to 7. So that's all automatically taken care of for you, and it notifies everyone in the game log that happened. So that's E-res siphons. And notice how it happens immediately after activation. There is no delay, because really there's nothing that can cancel this card in the game. Alright, so let's go ahead and pass through this ability round here. And then we're going to see the final, the final unique component to this faction, which is the flagship, right? So the flagship is combat related. So we're going to get Bob here to move his ships into the active system. That way we can have a combat. And then we're going to pass on this ability round here. Then Bob is not going to announce retreats. Okay, so Bob's going to roll for space combat. Produce 3 hits. Now, before I do this, I'm just going to go over what the flagship says once more, right? So when you're rolling combat with this ship, if this ship rolls a 9 or a raw 9 or a 10, we're going to get to apply 2 additional hits. So let's see if we can get that to happen. If we can't, we have a way of restoring the point of the game from here, and we'll keep rolling until we see that effect happen. So let's roll for space combat, and we produced 2 hits there, and let's see where they came from. Ah, perfect. Oh, nope, never mind, it's a 7. So we're going to, we'll try this a couple of times, and then if we don't get it, maybe we'll just kind of move on here. We'll just reset the game from the last save point. Check the game log for hits. Close that time. Not quite. And we'll give it a couple of more shots here. So we'll try 2 more times, and if we can't get it, then we'll just move on. Alright, so we'll roll. Ooh, 6 hits. That looks promising. Ah, perfect. There we go. So the results you see are the raw numbers, right? And if you look through this, so we just landed 6 hits. So we got 1, 2 from the flagship. And that's it, right? So, normally this would just be 2 hits, but recall hovering over the JNS Hylerim again, that we get 2 additional hits, right? In addition to the hits we landed with the ship itself. So actually, yeah, we got the 9 and the 0 hit, plus 2 from the 9, plus 2 from the 0. So the modifiers add a total of 4 extra hits. And that's where the 6 hits come from. Yeah. And again, this feature happens automatically, right? So if you forget about your flagship ability, the game will automatically produce that ability for you, which is nice. And so our invader here has a total of 5 ships, so that means we automatically are going to win the combat here, because we only have to produce 3 hits, and we have plenty of hits to assign there. So that's nice. And I believe that takes us to the end of the Universities of Jol-Nar. It's pretty cool. That brings us now to the 8 factions in the that you can either pick in the random selection mode or the all pick mode. Yeah. So I'll say if you have any comments on the video, if you think we implemented something incorrectly, if you noticed a bug that I didn't notice, or if you have any recommendations to who you think should be implemented next, feel free to, in fact, I encourage you to leave a comment down below. Generally, we've just been implementing factions as we go here with no real motive. You know, it's not like, oh, I'm doing my favorite factions first or whatever. But, you know, if enough people said I want faction X next, we'll probably see faction X next. But we'll stop that here for now. And just want to thank you again for watching. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Take care.